Welcome to Untethered to Rooted, a podcast that brings you a collection of stories around grief, healing, and identity. Hear from everyday people how grief and loss shape their identity and how their identity shapes the way they heal and process grief. I'm your host, Daugherty, a licensed psychotherapist with extensive experience dealing with grief, both personally and professionally. And if you want to hear stories with gems and practical tools for healing, stay tuned for more. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Untethered to Rooted. Today, we'll be exploring grief as a young caregiver and the healing journey after your parent who you've been caregiving for has passed. For most college students, they are told the world is their oyster, and they oftentimes have excitement and ideas for getting their life started and career pursuits post-college. And for our particular guest, Mary Serafin, she was brand new to the working world, kickstarting her career in the fast-paced, high-stress world of consulting. She was starting her first project when her mom was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And while she was thinking about how to make a large and meaningful global impact in her career one day, she had to quickly pivot to taking care of her mother indefinitely, full-time, for over a year until she passed. A complicating factor for Mary was that her mother's health condition was private, and she quietly gave care while navigating work responsibilities, putting her own passions and goals on pause. And so we'll talk about this more today, and we'll share more about Mary. Mary is 29 years old. She's a Filipino American from Los Angeles. She's currently living in London, pursuing her MBA at London Business School. She kicked off her early career in business design consulting, and later gender equality investment strategy. In London, she's focused on connecting her passion for growth and innovation with women's empowerment in the field of women's sports. So welcome, Mary. And I'm wondering, I asked all my guests who come on here, what are some identities that are important to you so that we can socially locate you and see the lens through which you position yourself?
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's so exciting to be here. So, some of the identities that are important to me are I truly identify as an eldest daughter, still a healing daughter, but my mother's daughter is what I like to tell myself. I'm the first in my family to move abroad and pursue a graduate degree, so I definitely identify as a student going through a new, considerably major life transition. And then personally, I'm Catholic. I consider myself queer. I'm sober, 100% sober, and neurodivergent as well.
Great. Thanks, Mary. Yeah. And I'm wondering, just from everything that you shared, I'm wondering how that connects with your topic today, of this topic today around grief as a young caregiver and also your own healing journey after losing your loved one.
I think my identity as a young caregiver has been a really instrumental one in terms of who I am today. I think when I was going through caregiving, I would consider it like a long form of grief, if you will, in terms of being a healing eldest daughter. I think a lot of the identity that has influenced how I process grief is to some degree being some level of a hyper committed, hyper independent eldest daughter. So what that means to me is it was a challenge to navigate being a full-time, potentially like a high stress career employee to being a full-time caregiver. But for me, it really impacted me because I had a really strong value of family, and I feel very thankful that I decided to essentially what I tell myself is love someone until their very last dying breath. Like that is something that I really hold closely in terms of how passionate I am about my family. And so that's a big part, I suppose, of my identity and how it influenced, the grief that I experienced while I was long-term caregiving is what I call it.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you talk more about that? I'm curious to know more about just this value of committing yourself to your family, and loving them to their last breath and what that meant for you.
For me, loving someone to their last dying breath, like there's a bit of it that feels like maybe for some, like that's what they're supposed to do, maybe in like the cultural narrative or, even a religious narrative, or, just a certain expectation. For me, it wasn't necessarily a no-brainer, because I think there's, considerable trade-offs to, you know, not starting theoretically like a career that you have been working towards, not being financially independent to some degree because of, taking time off from work. But for me, when I thought through, I basically told myself, if tomorrow's the last day that I have with my mom, like, I want it. I want every single second of it. I want to know her hopes, dreams, and aspirations, and the essentially the questions that if you're on the deathbed with your mom, like, what are the things you want to know about her life? So for me, it was really trying to, quote, like, squeeze out all the love that I can get until her very last dying breath, which I still envision and can visualize in my head, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that it's important how you mentioned just squeezing. That's so visual of just like squeezing all the love out of your mom and like spending that time and valuing that time with your mom. It's hard when you have like almost it's a brings new meaning to the term deadline, but when you have like a you know,
Love a good death
but
joke.
yeah, death jokes. I mean, Mary, you and I have death jokes, but
Definitely.
yeah, fortunately for everybody else, just knowing that your time is limited with your loved one, and that is also just important to like really spend all that time. And so I'm wondering, just of all these identities that you've mentioned, how have they like helped you process your grief, or even made it challenging to navigate grief?
I think there has been the challenge and the complication of being someone who is wholeheartedly committed to taking care of someone, and then that relationship to how you take care of yourself after they've passed, which I think is kind of the topic that we've had for today. So, just for a little bit of context, when I was graduating from college, well, in general, my mom and I were extremely close, and we had a lot of very similar visions around wanting to create a very big life of impact. A lot of it centered around women's empowerment, girls' empowerment. And so, just a quick story I'll go into is that on her deathbed, essentially, one of the very last things that she wanted to make sure she did was essentially provide scholarships with some of her, her life's earnings to girls at her high school in the Philippines. Like, that was her literal dying wish. And so, what that means to me is growing up, there was a lot of focus on how do you give back to your community? How do you help uplift others? She was from the Philippines, and that was just a really big part of her as she's, went on and made it in America. And so, what that meant for me is together we kind of envisioned a future of like creating massive impact together, whether that was building a girls' school one day or just increasing like representation for like more Filipino women in leadership. That was like our narrative together.
Mm.
And so the complicated part about kind of moving on afterward is that so much of my future was envisioned together. And so when I think through or when I was thinking through like how do I kind of move on or move forward when so much of my goals and dreams and, aspirations were kind of connected to my mom and my why in so many ways, that was really hard for me to take on and to navigate. And to me, that's kind of the chapter that I'm in right now. So after she passed, I basically picked up my suitcases and moved. I moved twice. I moved first to Seattle for a really awesome job in gender equality. So some of what she and I envisioned together just manifested. And then I got the second opportunity to move to London. I applied to business school and saw some of the stories that I had around making a global impact come to life. And so
Wow.
the challenge that I had is when you start to think through how does this relate through the journey that you've been on together, it's complicated because like I'm still healing. I'm still trying to understand like what is that relationship that I have with her and our dreams together, or maybe the dreams that I have and I'm reshaping on my own. So there's a lot of complications as to how do you now think about like how do I pursue the dreams that I've put on pause, and how does the grief that I experienced to date now influence what actually matters to me?
Yeah. Would you say that it sort of has it clarified what matters to you more? Or it sounds like the things that you pursued, they sort of, as you meant, and your wording of like they manifested or they like came to light or they came to fruition. And so, yeah, I'm wondering about that for you.
I would say it helped clear out things that felt kind of superfluous or aren't aligned with like what really, really matters to me. And that means like I have this like theory of like or this idea, someone else's idea, but like where you spend your life is where you spend your love. And so I want to ensure that what's in my orbit I really love. And so it's helped me remove things that, sap energy, for example. So I would
Yeah.
say like
Wait, can you say that again, that line?
well, where you spend your life is where you spend your love. That line.
Where you spend your life is where you spend your love. Hmm.
I would say so. I
Yeah.
think it's one identity I potentially skipped over, but really influenced a lot of this simultaneously, is that I also identify as a niece, like wholeheartedly. My mom has a total of there's 9 siblings, so there's a total of 10 of them, and unfortunately 9 of them died young. And
Wow.
I think, you know, my family deeply understands grief, but when it finally happened, quote, to me, it was just a different level of grief. And so I am really, really focused on ensuring that what I have around me, I get to love in the moment as much as possible because so much of life is unpromised. So I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but to go back to the
Yeah.
question on of like what I pursue, I suppose, and how's that shaped, I think it's become more narrow and focused into some of my own dreams. So, for example, I am super passionate about actually the work I was doing in consulting. I was designer. My background is in design actually, and so I got to focus on really cool design, business design oriented projects, then in gender equality. And when I thought through like, okay, if I were to die tomorrow, like what's something that I would have wanted to like do, pursue, or achieve, or just say that I tried. Similar in the way that my mom always tried to do something until her last dying breath, as I like to say. And for me, just that's like a natural fan, player, passionate human, it was to play basketball or work for the WNBA, for example. Like it was a goal that if I closed my eyes, I could just see. I always thought it'd be like decades literally from now. But I think that's a good example of how my visions and passions actually narrowed down into something that I was personally passionate about. There's still a lot of alignment around like uplifting some of the same, visions and values that my mom had, but now it's in a way that I think feels more true to me.
Yeah, it sounds like it just kind of brought those things that were things you eventually wanted to pursue into like, well, let me do that now. Let me move to London now. Let me move to Seattle for this incredible, interesting job now. That's really interesting. Yeah, just like how everything was brought to moving up the timelines, right? That's what it sounds like a little bit.
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a strong element of presence and like being present and valuing this one life that we had in the way that really feels like it's yours. Like the decisions and the values are yours. I don't know if I could necessarily say timeline because I think what I've experienced has made me realize that like our roadmaps are our ideas and goals at the end of the day, but like so much of life happens for you. Is what I would say. So yeah.
Yeah. Since such a large piece of like your identity was just being a young caregiver, I was wondering like what was that like just balancing being a young caregiver with also working in this like fast-paced consulting world? Like what was that like on the daily? Because I think there are probably listeners who also have maybe a similar experience of being like a full-time working person while also full-time caregiving. And so could you shed some light on your particular experience around that? Like, what was that like day to day, week to week? And then
Yeah.
holding this like secret.
Yeah, essentially. It was a lot. My therapist at the time would kind of frame it as it doesn't matter if you're a superwoman, it's a lot for anyone. Like, I think caregiving is something that a lot of folks really consider later in life, like when their parents are like naturally aging, so 40s, 50s, and so on. I think the young caregiver experience was unique, but for me, unfortunately, it felt normal because it kind of, quote, tainted so much of my early career. So they're kind of in survival mode. And it's quite hard to, even if I thought I was at the time, like disassociate the two minds. And as someone, I like to say work loves me. That I
Mm.
work and I work quite hard, and I feel like I tend to cope actually through working harder. And when I was in consulting, it really worked for me. Like I was really getting promoted at a very, relatively fast pace, I would say. But I think so much of that goes into effect of um, trying to kind of almost like block out some of the day-to-day things that were just really hard and painful to actually focus on. So you asked about like what it actually looks like on the day-to-day, like at the worst, at the peaks of it, and I'll try to maybe compare to like a normal day. But at the worst and the peaks of it, you know, it doesn't matter the time. It's a 24/7 job. At 3 in the morning, I would wake up just to check if my mom's still breathing. She was 100% vegetated, essentially, total care is what she would call it. So in the beginning, it was, making meals and being able to still tell jokes and stories. And, to some degree, she was still able to do that. But very quickly, like a lot of her energy levels just quickly sapped. She very quickly lost the ability to walk and like move her hands or move her head. So there's a lot of like feeding through meals. I think some of the highlights of being so close to her while caregiving are the little things. Like we played a lot of Scrabble during our time together and watched some of her favorite movies, which I will hold with me forever. But in between the Scrabble and, the bite chewing or like the spoon feeding, I suppose, are like, client workshops and meetings and presenting to directors. And then pausing for your 15 or 20 minutes to, go back, make sure she's still breathing through her nap or whatever it is, and making sure that, you've administered her like hydromorphine at the correct dosage and amounts. And then going back and doing some work. And like we mentioned, it was a private experience, let's say. So I just didn't realize that that wasn't. I mean, it sounds obvious to say that it's not normal, but I really did not realize that it wasn't normal because it was just like, let's survive.
Because you were
And
in it.
I was just in it. There was no
Yeah.
time to think
Yeah.
and process. And eventually, it started off as like part time, so to speak. But then eventually, I just stopped working indefinitely, and I would never actually take it back. Like I think caregiving, as painful as it was I feel very lucky that even though it was painful to see your mom on a deathbed for so long, I'm so lucky that I had that time with her. Like it was like I loved someone till their last dying breath. I did everything that I could to keep someone that you care about alive. So it was
Mm.
part kind of vibes.
Yeah. Oh, it's so important. And the love that you have for your mom just like coming out in the care. And I was just listening as you were going back and forth. Like, I think just people who don't have that experience around caregiving or even understanding, like, just the life and death nature of it while people are at work, like, people just sort of see you as like work Mary, you know? Like,
Yeah.
you were mentioning, like, yeah, I had workshops and I had presentations, I had all these different things. And then when I'd have like a 15-minute break, I'd make sure my mom's alive. Like,
Yeah.
whoa, like, and and then you're like, okay, cool, she's alive, I'm gonna go back. Like just that the thinking around that on a day-to-day basis is just like where was the space, or the time for you to really like think about that. And it makes me think about just like our culture around work and not really like having that work-life balance sometimes in some work environments. And so you mentioned that you had to like pause that and pause work and just care for your mom at a certain point. And I'm wondering for you if you'd be willing to share, like, what was that moment for you where you were like, I can't do the back and forth of this, that I actually need to like pause work so that I can care for my mom full time?
Oh, that's a really great question. And the reality is that it's a decision that's kind of bigger than just me, and it's really a family decision, I would say, because I think the construct against like home care is hard. Like having at-home nurses is expensive in general, like in short, and the care that someone needs is full time. Like in the end, like for example, one part that I skipped over, but is really a part of it is like taking her to appointments. That truly, like for example, chemo on lunch breaks, like that truly like does kind of bleed into the day, and it's tough because so many things become unpredictable. I
Chemo
would
lunch
say
breaks. Wow. Yeah.
I laugh, but it's like it just was so real at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not normal. I'm giving like Mary like 23, 24, like grace. Like I don't know how she did it now. I feel so I feel free from the experience, but it was hard on her, I suppose. But to make the transition, I think honestly, I had a lot of support from work. I think work actually was a safe haven, and I think I really value leaders that encourage me to just take that space. Because, like I said, work loves me, and so I think people who encourage you to create that bridge, like that was actually my support system. I'll give you like an example. They were so encouraging that during the heat of my mom's um, treatment, which honestly was so ongoing, it's hard to say if there was a high or a low, but they would send me like a gift, literally, in the mail. Every other Friday, I'd get like a little plant, which was so sweet, or like a meditation book, or like coffee, or a massage, or like a mindfulness session. Like, I think having an environment in a workplace that says, hey, we see you is actually like, I'm not gonna say it's underrated because I think people know how valuable it is, but I am so thankful that I had like them in my corner because that was the only way that any of this was going to work.
Wow. I'm actually really glad that you shared that because I actually don't know if everybody has that same work situation. And there might be like employers listening that are like, I don't know how to support my employees at work who like are going through this. And so it sounds like were those things helpful to you? Like for them to periodically send those things or
Yeah, I mean, didn't anticipate any of it. I was 100% kind of removed from work in a sense, but I actually had my director's mom or dad died when he was also about 24 or 25. And I think I didn't realize how gracious he really was to me at the time, but I think that was a big factor into some of the treatment and care. I don't know if, I mean, I'm certain not everyone has this experience, but I think I was very blessed to have like that center of a community.
yeah, yeah. And I think actually that's a really important point. It's like if people have gone through it before, then sometimes it's actually helpful for informing like what is needed. And so there's something to be said, you know, in what you didn't fully explicitly say, but also I think there's but it's there is that like the fact that you knew that your like director had gone through that experience, you know? Yeah, your director, right? Is that what you
I would say I didn't know initially, but they did bring it up to me, and I think there's just I was surprised that there were so many people who, after the fact, like could relate and could empathize directly. Having people looking out for each other was, that was it for me.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, I think the healing piece of this too, it not only happens like after loss, it's also like kind of, I would imagine receiving those meditative books and all of those like massage sessions and things like that were actually like healing pieces
Yeah,
even before losing your mom, even before the actual like death itself that like had this anticipatory period having you can also have healing too is sort of what I'm hearing
yeah,
from you as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. It was extremely healing and so kind and generous.
Hmm. Yeah, so I'm wondering just about that healing piece of things. I'm wondering about your identities that influence your healing and what kind of encouraged your healing.
Oh, that's a good question. It's so ongoing, like the healing process, right? And also through the evolution of identities. And so we talked a little bit about like, being a daughter, I suppose, or even a niece and how that, has impacted my healing as, understanding that commitment to family. And I feel very healed, like, I feel good, well, healed, but good in knowing that I made the decisions, externally. I think a lot of the big internal bit of healing has been understanding how I move and show up in my next chapter. So for me, some of the identities that really stick out to me, we talked a little bit about kind of this next chapter of being a student and really just transitioning into a new theoretically like a new like staying in a new country or a new geography or just kind of this new life. And I think doing those things for myself have been like a really healing part of the journey. Like my whole focus of my MBA, outside of like some professional goals, it's real, but are just doing the things that make my inner child happy, like things that I put on hold, things that I couldn't even really think about because not for any like, I don't want to, yeah, I just couldn't think about because I was preoccupied with caregiving and grieving. But a lot of the healing element of it is taking time to do the things that are just the things that you naturally want to do. So for me, that has been like playing basketball or trying new activities that I've never done before that, challenged me. So for example, I really wanted to do a triathlon, but I didn't really know how to swim. So doing those types of things and just those things that are like that process of like movement and being back in your body and watching your body heal. We didn't talk about this, but like I have a scale that tracks how much muscle I have, and I lost all of it overnight, essentially, when my mom passed. Like it's a really dramatic decline. And so for me, coming from, a leave, some really bad mental health challenges, a lot of it has been focused on how do I heal myself and my body and be one with my body. I would say that's the first part.
Yeah.
I think the second part, when it comes to identities, and it's a little bit complicated, is that when it comes to where I want to spend my life and where I want to spend my love, a lot of that come down to the relationships that I wanted to be a part of my life. One bit aspect that was very healing for me was when I was reflecting on like the type of relationships that I really wanted to be in. It made me realize that maybe I wasn't straight, essentially. Like the TLDR of it is that I wasn't sure about my sexuality while I was. This sounds kind of strange to juxtapose this idea, but while I was grieving, because I was doing a lot of focus on, okay, well, if I were to die tomorrow, what would I want to do, to know, to experience? And actually, one of those big pieces were like, well, I would want to know if I was queer. And so a big part of my healing and identity was actually to explore that for myself. And I feel like it has been like this crazy roller coaster of ride of self-discovery. But when I look at where I am now in terms of my confidence and self-assurance, like I feel so like gracious for that chapter of, they call it like baby gay, like baby Mary, who was figuring this out and asking these tough questions that essentially came down to the root of the identity of how do you want to show up and who do you want to be. Because I had so much of these big life influences and transitions around me, that when I was really looking inward, it was really focusing on, okay, well, like, what matters to me? Who am I? How do I want to show up? So I would say that kind of those two identities there, of one like a student transitioning to the next chapter and focusing on, the pieces that just naturally make you happy, and then, understanding the relationships and who you want to be with, which resulted in like me discovering my sexuality, were the two bits that focused on the like, big impetus for my healing journey.
Yeah, that's so significant. And yeah, it's almost like it's kind of what you were saying before of like you wouldn't take any of the caregiving back for your mom, but it's also like you wouldn't like have discovered these aspects of your identity had you not, or maybe you would have, like who's to say, right? But like this particular event also like has shifted really you thinking about what connections and what people you want to spend your time with and be in relationship with and be connected to. It's so important and integral to who you are as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like I was just questioning every aspect of my being after going through something so honestly traumatic,
Yeah.
transformative, if you will.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And as you were speaking about even the first part of the mental health piece, and I'm wondering just like in terms of mental health healing, and even before that of just thinking about like the constant switch for your brain to go from like work to caregiving to work to caregiving and then finally fully to caregiving, like how much mental health healing probably had to take place. And so I'm curious just about that arc as well. I know you mentioned a little bit of the physical piece, so please feel free to sprinkle in some like mind body pieces as well. But I'm curious to know both like yes, your physical journey arc of like losing muscle mass, but also like what happened with mental health from taking care of your mom to now and then healing.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a beautiful question because I think when I reflect on the whole journey, there are some like really strong, like I'm very proud of it. There's some strong elements of resilience and just pushing through day after day. And this is gonna start like very obviously, but like losing a parent like sucks. Like the grief hits you. I had a friend, I have a friend who just lost her mom, and she was asking like when does the darkness
Mm.
stop in the tunnel? Like when do you see that bit of light? And everyone's stories their own, and all I could say is that like it actually does come, and we've talked about it in the past, but like the circle around grief like does get bigger, and you heal, but in the moment, oh my God, it is so endless. And I think the the mental toil is not to be understated. I would say that there's two things that I would focus on. And the first was that I would just try to feel as many feelings as possible, like
Yeah.
the highs, the lows, to try not to judge my feelings. And a lot of that came down to anger. And I'm not really an angry person. Like I get sad and I get really sad. But for the first time, like I was so mad, and I mentioned that like my instinct is to just essentially work harder. So when I was grieving, I wasn't on a medical leave, for example, or a leave. I just was like, I'm gonna go back to work. I'm gonna plan my mom's funeral and I'm gonna go back to work. Like I was just working. Like I was on a client project. This is so silly. Let me backtrack that because I skipped a year, but that is an important part of the story. But essentially, for the first year, I really dove right back into work very
Oh.
quickly. And I think there are some pieces of like, how does that impact your mental health in the long run?
How did
I
it?
was working really hard. Like I got promoted very quickly and all that.
Oh.
And just for some context, we didn't have like a formal internment until a year after because of the pandemic, because of like the building. So that's what I was skipping. But essentially, I was on a client project during that internment, and then I flew back home for the actual internment, and then I went back to work the next day. And what I learned from this is the first part from this experience is that you need to take a break or it's all gonna add up to you.
Mm.
So my mental health, while I was kind of doing and doing and doing, it's hard to say actually the state of your mental health if you're not like feeling and feeling feelings. And so down the road, this did come back and kind of add up. And even though all good things had happened, I moved to Seattle. I got a really awesome job in international development, gender equality. I was planning to move to London. The the feelings came back, and it was really hard. So what that meant was that I was basically forced on a medical leave. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which was really hard. And I don't really talk about it much. I'm not completely shameful. I think there are still some parts of me that don't fully forgive not taking that that pause, essentially. But I think, and, and I had been in therapy and psychiatry for quite some time. I think the way that I bounced back, I'm really proud of. It's kind of the second part that I wanted to mention is that setting yourself up in the right systems to heal are really important. So not missing my psychiatry or my therapy or my coaching and all that. My therapist at the time would call it that you have to make time to grieve, essentially. Like you have to put it in your calendar is essentially what it came down to, which was quite confusing for me at the time when you're like, well, I'm grieving nonstop. Like, what do you mean I need to make more time to grieve? But like really planning like what these healing moments are for you. I think that is what actually helped turn around my mental health at that point. So I was able to like manage my way out of some of these like really impactful manic episodes and understand that, I mentioned in the beginning that like there's no like it's like you can be, have all of these superhero traits or whatever. That's what my therapist would say. I'm not a superhero, I don't claim that, but that's what she would tell me. But that like it's a lot and that you need to give yourself rest and space and just go easy on yourself. And I think that has been kind of the biggest part of my healing journey over the last couple of years as I went into business school. Like, let me just try to like relax and take it easy. So I tried to like, I really relied on LBS. That's where I go to school to help me with their different like not medical, but well-being services, as they call it. So I have both bipolar disorder and ADHD, and I was just terrified of the academic experience, and I was still taking medication for PTSD, for example. So these like really just powerful like stop you in your tracks, almost triggering moments that I just couldn't control out of nowhere during some of my happiest moments. My point is that to be able to bounce back on the mental health side, like I needed to have my systems. I needed to ask for support, which was just a huge thing because I feel like I didn't have support while I was actually caregiving. So I think that was just huge to turn around my actual mental health. And so when I was saying like it's beautiful because like I actually feel like incredibly resilient. Like I still have all of my systems in place, even if you feel like you're doing well, it's important to keep them going. But I would say that has been the mental health journey for me is there's a really big piece about like getting back into your body, but not really judging where you're at mentally and emotionally. A big part of it is that, while I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I became sober. So that was I was already not drinking very much, but then I kind of put a stake in the ground to say, like, look, if I'm going to have all of these unprocessed feelings, like just feel them. Like, it doesn't matter how long it's been. I think that's a big part is that, I always felt like I needed to heal by X period of time. The 1 year anniversary, the 2 year anniversary, like that's, forget it. Like
Just an
healing is not
endpoint, huh?
linear.
Yeah.
Healing is not linear, and so feelings may be there. And so for me, like part of like, for example, my sobriety journey has been to, give myself some grace and peace and just know that like your feelings might come back up, and I don't think that along with the medication, it's worthwhile to kind of mix those. So for me, it's just been really focused on feeling and being the moment.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing that, Mary, of just like that whole arc around mental health, because I can just imagine just all of the things and everything that you've shared. I don't even have to imagine it. Everything that you've shared is just really just spoken to the fact that your mental health really took a toll with working more
Yeah.
in stress and recognizing that like rest and breaks aren't luxuries, they're needs is sort of like what I'm hearing. And I hope people who are listening out there that also sticks. I think what you shared is really just an important example of like how beneficial it is to have like take a pause so that you can put in systems in place so that you can examine what kind of support your life does need, because you were really flipping from you soul caregiving into like, okay, now I need support and I need to figure out what systems are in place to like continue to support me. And that's not like a luxury thing. That's a thing I need for my mental health to be able to heal as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so I am curious, just shifting from systems to just more like rituals and traditions
Yeah.
and ways you've learned to hold and process grief and also like facilitate your own healing.
Yeah. Rituals are great. They're things you can plan for and also things that maybe just naturally happens. What I mean by that are I think I feel a lot around certain dates. So like anniversarial grief, for example, or even anniversarial healing is what I like to think about it. So for me, something a time period that's kind of tough is around Thanksgiving. So I can always visualize exactly what happened 3 Thanksgivings ago. And it's honestly quite painful. But there's also a bit that focuses for me on how much growth has happened and how maybe some elements of the experience no longer feel painful. The complications I won't go into as to why that period was painful. It's just a really stark decline in my mom's health. But so what I tried to do, like ritualistically, kind of from the holiday period, which was quite painful, up until her death anniversary, which was on February 9th. I feel like I become really, really intentional about like going easy on myself during those periods, because I know that it's not uncommon to just like burst out into tears.
Yeah.
Like thinking about pumpkin pie, for example. It's like kind of silly, but I can vision, I can like visually
Crying into your
trigger
pie.
the most random things because of how it reflects to my feelings 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But to get back into the ritual of things, like it's actually not letting go of the rituals of like what that meant to you before those dates. So still celebrating Thanksgiving, still celebrating Christmas, even though so much of your holiday blues were just so painful years ago. Another thing that I really try to focus on, it's around my mom's death anniversary, just a bit more context into my mom. Her name was Araceli, La Madrid Serafin. I like to say her name so it doesn't, get forgotten.
Yeah.
But for us, even more context actually. So my birthday is on the 12th of February. She died on the 9th. My brother's is on the 10th of February, and my sister's on the 21st of February. And so we always have kind of joked that my mom, we always had like a joint birthday party, me and my siblings, and we kind of joked that my mom like wanted to join the party by dying so close to our birthdays. Um, but so honestly, like it's somewhat, it's not celebratory, but like somewhat like it doesn't feel as heavy as it used to be. So my mom, Araceli Aries, was quite an impassioned woman. She was super small, like maybe 4'11", maybe 5'10", like whatever but she would say 5'10". Everyone else would kind of give her, an eyebrow if she was actually that size. But she was very like full of life and loved to kind of challenge herself and challenge us to really show up and do things that kind of push like our limits and our capabilities of what we thought. So for me, for example, on my 24th birthday, which was my last like healthy birthday, with her being healthy, I ran my first what I call like half marathon to kind of like
Marathon,
push
like your
myself
name.
and yeah, except Mary, yeah, exactly. You got it. It's really fun actually. And she was really proud of me for that. And I feel like I've tried to continue that trend of trying to use my birthday as like, and her death anniversary effectively as kind of like a milestone of like, am I still kind of like challenging myself and making the most out of this one special life? And
Mm.
so on her first year death anniversary, I ran another half marathon and raised money for breast cancer, which was really beautiful and definitely a healing experience. And this upcoming Sunday is her, like, I guess technically 3 years from when she was actually like buried, or her funeral. So I'll run my first I'll have
Wow.
my like biggest triathlon, which is really exciting. Definitely something that I never thought I could do, especially not really knowing how to swim. So that
Mm.
feels very huge in pushing
Yeah.
myself. So there are definitely some bigger rituals, but I think there's also some very small and beautiful rituals that I do, but like definitely try to keep to like us, her and me. So our birthdays and my birthday and whatever is very close to Valentine's Day, and her favorite flower were these red roses with baby's breath. And my mom, living in LA, always loved to like go to the flower district essentially and like make bouquets. And she would love to make like a bouquet or a flower display, like a real one, like stay up into the night. And so for me, I do that with her on her death anniversary, and I'll go to the market and I'll put together her favorite bouquet, and it makes me feel like really, really close to her. And so I did that with a friend last year, and just cried a lot making these bouquets, but something about sharing that tradition and keeping that going, that's something that I'll always to carry that with me. So those are some of the rituals that I do to, go easy on myself, acknowledge the growth that I've had, but really celebrate the life that she's kind of encouraged us to like really live loudly still.
I love hearing about these ideas, Mary. Like all of them are just, yeah, the marathon and the and the date anniversaries. I think dates can be, for some people they're like, I don't want to think about the date, but for other people they're like, the date is so important, and it can
Yeah.
be a reminder of just like every year it's a check-in for yourself of
Mm-hmm.
where you're at. How are you challenging yourself? How are you thinking about yourself? And it's like honoring your mom and also honoring yourself.
Yeah, I would say exactly, you got it.
Yeah, so you get a chance to sort of like recognize like the relationship with your mom is not just your mom, it's you and your mom. That's beautiful. That's beautiful that you could include yourself in that relationship.
I didn't think about that like explicitly like you mentioned, but it does feel like we're doing it together, like kind of how I envisioned in the very, very beginning when we were thinking about making an impact together, like with like our lives. Like it feels like we still get to do that and like celebrate ourselves together.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. And that's all too real. I mean, yes, I mean a little joke, but of the pie and crying into your pumpkin pie, I just feel like, yeah, that's so, I mean, Mary, you and I have spoken about the fact that, my mom literally died like the week before Thanksgiving. And so, just like the salted pumpkin pie that wasn't originally salted.
Oh my gosh, I get that, and that's
Yeah.
adorable.
Yeah. Everything's a
Yeah,
little
I was proud of
saltier.
myself. But
Yeah. Everything gets a little
well,
salty around Thanksgiving.
I'm always proud when I can just fully eat a pumpkin pie and not think about any emotional triggers associated with the holiday.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
huge element of growth, right?
Yeah, that is big growth. And also like yeah, holidays can just be like a harder time for grief, and then that's also what we're not to make light of the fact that like holidays are a hard time for people as well, but like there are moments too, that are just like, wow, yeah, this is not originally how I planned this pumpkin pie, or this is not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so yes, yes, holiday times. So you've mentioned just so much wisdom already, and kind of want to know just about like, yes, your ways in which identity has like influenced your grief and healing, but in reverse, I'm wondering how grief and healing have influenced or shaped your identities, if at all.
Definitely. I think this is also a really, really amazing question. One that I probably haven't actually like really reflected on before this moment. But I think a lot of my identity is has been shaped by grief and healing. In the beginning, whether this is still true or not, I used to think about it essentially as life before my mom died and then life after my mom died, and kind of how I personally and fundamentally shifted in terms of my identity before them. And for a long period of time, it was hard to actually think about who I was before that identity that has been influenced by grief and healing. And so I think I'll never be able to disassociate what maybe one day I will, never say never, but disassociate like what being a young caregiver did for me. A lot of positives too. Like I became a lot more self-aware and focused on what really matters to me. But I think it really influenced my like the way that I show up in the world and the work that I do, that I, decide to participate in. Because I think it felt like such a privilege almost to have that experience of navigating, a new world, a new career, and so on, but having that opportunity to like still be there for my mom and to see how her and to kind of be there with her as her impact and the dreams that she kind of had to let go of were falling by the wayside. So that juxtaposition of starting, quote, a life and seeing a life end was like, it influenced me immensely, honestly. Like, I think it's really hard for me to see a life where I'm not just like in full alignment, like in one shape or another. So whether that means like the work that I pursue or enabling like the lifestyle in the communities and the relationships that I want to have, that I want to like live, more broadly. So I think it's made me really be intentional and prioritize where I want to spend like my life and love. Like I identify as someone who's aligned, if you will, and anything that feels misaligned, I have to be like, it's still painful. Some things that I want to be in my orbit, whether it be like a relationship or a job or a vision, something I envisioned for myself, but if it's not for me, like I'm very quick to let that go, knowing that there's really only like one life to live and to be like very mindful and present, knowing that, seeing someone like grieving for so long, like both during caregiving and after caregiving and, to some degree, regularly. So I would say grief and healing has definitely influenced kind of the post death Mary, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it being such an instrumental like part of my life, I kind of like vacillate between telling myself like, yes, it is a very fundamental part of my life. Something that I still find hard to talk to because I don't want to make it the whole story. Like, it's not the whole story. There was someone really, really passionate and ambitious and still really high valued before my mom passed, even though it's harder to like unlock that human sometimes. I try to tell myself that I am moving on by telling myself that it was a part of my story, but while it influences it in a very positive way, it doesn't have to dictate everything. Like, I think it's something that I'm still trying to figure out how do I, for example, when I'm recruiting for these jobs, like weave into how it actually did positively impact the direction that I have, or at what point, if any, do I kind of integrate that into, my personal human story, like when I meet people or something along those lines. Like, I think that is kind of the complication of being so fundamentally shifted in your story, but not really knowing how to kind of disassociate it from it's not everything that I am today. Like, I'm not only a former caregiver, whatever. Like, there's so many aspects of me. So I would say it's hard to kind of just say it's I will never be able to not be a former caregiver, but it's not my whole story. So I think if I feel a bit of both, to be honest, and sometimes it's hard to kind of figure out like to what degree is it more influential in how I'm showing up today or not. And
Hmm. Yeah, I think it sort of comes, it sounds like it just comes with time too, of just figuring out like when that feels like relevant for you to share, you know? But yeah, yeah. But also, like, I think it's so important for you to just name because of different people's experiences around grief. For some people, it's like, this is so integral to like my identity as a griever, like a lifelong
yeah,
griever, right? And then for some people, it's like, and as you've mentioned, like it's a part of your story, but it's not the whole story.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it's a facet
definitely.
of what you've experienced, but it's not like the totality of who you are.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah, yeah. And so as we're kind of wrapping up, I'm just wondering, like, what do you wish people knew about this topic? Or what do you wish, even if you prefer to answer this question, like, what do you wish you knew that you know
Oh,
now about this?
I love reflecting on the journey, honestly.
Hmm.
I think when I started off, especially in the privacy of my mom's space, like really not feeling like I can lean on someone, I kind of felt like I expected the experience to be quite isolating after she had passed. But I was really surprised as to how many people could relate to my story and to losing a parent young or being able even to have to take care of a parent, even for whatever period of time, a week, 2 weeks, whatever. And just realizing that there are people who can kind of relate to the gravity of what that is was a very healing experience for me because it made me realize that like you're truly not alone, and whether you are able to, ideally you could use your resources and find, build these support systems, but that's a process in itself and figuring out what's your healing journey or, whatever that looks like for you. But I think that's what I was surprised to realize that, you know, your vulnerability, begets more vulnerability, and in you sharing your stories, people are willing to empathize with you, and also you can empathize with people who also more recently lose their parents. And I think it's a beautiful actual cycle of I don't want to say like of bringing people together, but it kind of does. I used to call it like an underground club of people who lost their parents young, but like once people get like it really is a way to relate to people.
It
But
is.
I think that has been yeah, one of the things that I wish that I knew is that you're not going to be as alone as you think you are. Like you think, I thought I was going to be. Like I think leaning into the feelings, and leaning into the journey of healing, not judging your feelings throughout it all. I think those have been the bits that have like really that I've really carried with me that have just brought me to where I am today. And I'm really thankful for, going, through the journey of like leaning into my feelings ages ago and a couple years ago because I feel like I do get to live a very whole life. Like, ironically, like I haven't even cried once this episode, which I thought was great because I feel like this topic I couldn't even like any sort of word or phrase or reference could just like tons of tears, and I feel like it's a very like healing and growing journey just to reflect on how far you've come. So yeah, those are all the many things I would have told myself.
Mary, thank you. Thanks. What a beautiful sentiment also to just end on of like you're not as alone as you might think you are in this grief and healing journey. You know, I think that's part of the heart of this podcast, honestly, is just like sharing different people, different guest stories of what they've experienced, and maybe people relating to it and realizing like, oh, I'm not alone in this. And like, if I can hear Mary share these stories of like what she's like gone through and her with her various identities and various just being a young caregiver, like maybe that can encourage me in that, like in my journey wherever I'm at. So that's the hope. And so thank you so much. This was so great. And I just so appreciate you sharing so much of yourself. And I'm wondering if our listeners would like to connect with you. Please let us know if that's okay. And how you'd like for them to connect with you.
Yeah, I mean, my email, the most direct way, I suppose, mary.c.serafin@gmail.com. I'm sure we'll list it somewhere. Or you can always follow me on Instagram. I, for some reason, tend to be more responsive there. So that's at Mary C. Serafin. And just wanted to say, like, you can reach out for anything, genuinely sharing your stories, asking for resources, anything along those lines. It's a journey, and we all get to support each other to get through it. So
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I'll share that at the end of the episode in the show notes. So you can check out the show notes for Mary's information if you want to get in contact with her. And Mary, just thank you again for sharing about Aries. And I love hearing about your mom and about your love and care for her. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Untethered to Rooted. Untethered to Rooted is produced and hosted by me, Dana Daugherty. Original music was composed and performed by the ever-talented Daniel Dickinson. Thanks so much to our guests for sharing with us today. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. And follow us on social at Untethered to Rooted. And if you didn't like it, what podcast? Dana who? Until next time, take and give good care.